The ancient scrolls had been hidden for centuries, buried deep within the crypts of a forgotten monastery. Yet, the words inscribed on them, written in an elegant, almost ethereal hand, had never stopped whispering through the annals of history. They were prophecies, cryptic visions of a future that had yet to unfold. And in 2025, one of these predictions, long ignored and dismissed as mere superstition, would come into sharp focus. It all began with the sudden passing of Pope Francis on April 21, 2025. His death, while expected due to his age, sent shockwaves through the Catholic Church and the world. The Vatican, quiet in its mourning, prepared for the conclave to select the next leader of the world's largest religious community. The world watched with bated breath. Among the names whispered in hushed corridors, one stood out above the rest: Luis Antonio Tagle, the Archbishop of Manila, a man known for his humility, charisma, and deep spiritual insight. Could he be the next pope? But what if the world had already known the answer? As the days passed, a series of events unfolded that would send shockwaves through the Vatican, the clergy, and beyond. It started with an unexpected revelation. A scholar, deep in the archives of a library in Paris, had stumbled upon a long-lost manuscript. The manuscript, hidden in plain sight for centuries, contained a chilling passage from Nostradamus's Les Prophéties. The quatrain, written in his signature cryptic style, seemed to speak of a leader who would rise from the East, a man of deep faith and profound understanding, who would unite the Church during a time of great turmoil. The scholar, unsure of what to make of the discovery, reached out to a theologian named Father Gabriel, who had long been fascinated by the predictions of Nostradamus. Together, they deciphered the passage. It was clear that the prophecy pointed directly to Luis Antonio Tagle, though the details were eerily vague. Words like, "a bishop from the East who will hold the key to unity," and "his humility will become the crown of the faithful," were used, leading them to believe that Tagle was the man in question. As news of the prophecy spread, it was met with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Could Nostradamus, who had lived more than 500 years ago, have predicted the rise of Tagle, the man who was now being considered for the papacy? Could this be divine intervention at work? Or was it just a coincidence that a man from the East, so revered for his compassion and humility, was in line to become the next pope? Father Gabriel was not so sure. He had studied prophecies his entire life, and in his heart, he believed that there was something far deeper at play here. As the days leading up to the conclave grew tense, he felt a strange pull, a spiritual tug that guided him to seek out Tagle personally. He wanted to understand the man behind the prophecy, to see if there was truly a divine hand in his destiny. One evening, Father Gabriel found himself in Manila, sitting across from Luis Antonio Tagle in a small, humble chapel. The two men spoke for hours, discussing everything from faith to the future of the Church. Tagle's humility and deep compassion were evident, but so too was a quiet strength that radiated from him. It was as if he knew that something far greater than himself was guiding his steps. Father Gabriel finally asked the question that had been on his mind since the moment he first read the prophecy. "Do you believe that you are the one the world has been waiting for?" Tagle's response was soft, yet powerful. "I am but a servant, Father. I do not seek power, but rather I seek to serve. If it is the will of God for me to lead His Church, then I will do so with all my heart. But I am not the answer. He is." The words sent a shiver down Father Gabriel's spine. There was no arrogance in Tagle's voice, only an overwhelming sense of humility. And yet, in that moment, Father Gabriel knew that the prophecy was not just about a man's rise to power. It was about something much deeper. It was about faith, about divine purpose, about the mysterious ways in which God worked through His servants. As the conclave began in Rome, the world waited in suspense. And then, on April 29, 2025, something extraordinary happened. In a shocking, Turn of events, Luis Antonio Tagle was elected as the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. The Church had chosen him, an East Asian, a man of humble origins, with a heart full of compassion for the poor and the marginalized. The announcement was met with gasps and murmurs of astonishment. The prophecy had come true in a way that no one could have predicted. The man from the East had risen to lead the Church at a time of great crisis. The world seemed to hold its breath as Pope Tagle stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve. And then, as if on cue, the skies darkened for a moment. The wind picked up. The crowd below fell into a hushed reverence. Some saw it as a sign of divine approval, others, a dramatic omen. But Pope Tagle stood there, not with the triumph of a conqueror, but with the solemnity of a man fully aware of the weight of the mantle he had just taken on. In his first address as Pope, he spoke words that would resonate throughout the world. "I am here not to rule, but to serve. The Church is not a kingdom, but a sanctuary for all who seek God's love. We are called not to seek power, but to lift up the brokenhearted, to heal the wounds of the world. May we walk together in humility, faith, and hope." As the days passed, the prophecy and the reality of his papacy began to sink in. People started to wonder, had Nostradamus seen this coming? Was this truly the fulfillment of an ancient vision, or was it a testament to the way in which the divine worked in mysterious and miraculous ways? In the end, the answer was unclear. But one thing was certain. Pope Luis Antonio Tagle was a man of profound faith, a servant leader chosen not by prophecy, but by the people of God. And as he began his papacy, the world could only wait to see how his humility, compassion, and unwavering faith would shape the future of the Church. In the quiet reflection of his first days as Pope, Tagle found peace in the realization that whether or not Nostradamus had predicted his rise, the true prophecy lay not in the past, but in the future, a future that was still being written, one humble step at a time. The days following Pope Tagle's election were nothing short of extraordinary. The Church, though rooted in tradition, began to feel the winds of change. In the heart of the Vatican, behind the majestic walls that had housed centuries of power and doctrine, something new was brewing. Tagle's approach to leadership was unlike any pope before him. His humility was legendary, and it was clear that he did not seek to elevate the Vatican as a center of authority, but as a sanctuary for those in desperate need of love, compassion, and healing. But it wasn't just his words that captivated the world. It was his actions. The very first week after his election, Pope Tagle invited a group of homeless men and women into the Apostolic Palace. It was unheard of. He washed their feet, not in a ceremonial way, but with deep reverence, as if seeing the face of Christ in each one of them. His public prayers became moments of raw emotion, often filled with tears as he lifted up the marginalized of the world. He spoke often about the forgotten ones, the ones the world had cast aside, and about the power of love to transform the deepest suffering. But it wasn't just his devotion to the poor that raised eyebrows. There was something deeper at work, something mysterious unfolding within the very fabric of the Vatican. One evening, Father Gabriel, who had become an unlikely confidant of Pope Tagle, was invited to dinner in the Apostolic Palace. The two men sat across from each other in a modest, candle-lit room. The air between them was thick with unspoken thoughts. Father Gabriel had witnessed the transformation of Tagle from humble archbishop to the head of the Catholic Church, and it was clear to him that something beyond human understanding was guiding this man. But what was it? "Your Holiness," Father Gabriel began, his voice tinged with wonder and concern. "I must ask you something. You have spoken of divine purpose in your life, of feeling led by a higher calling. But there's a weight to this. It feels as though your path was foretold, as though you have been chosen for something far greater than the papacy itself." Pope Tagle looked at him quietly, his eyes calm, as if he had been waiting for this question. I have often wondered the same, Father. There is a quiet voice inside me, one that has been guiding me for many years, even before I became a priest. It's a feeling, not a vision, but more of a deep knowing, as if the path is laid before me and I must walk it. Father Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes intense. Could it be that the prophecies of Nostradamus, could they be real? Could his words about you be true? A flicker of something, an emotion too complex to name, passed through Pope Tagle's face. It was not fear nor pride, but a recognition of the weight that these ancient words now carried. I do not know, Father. I do not seek the fulfillment of prophecies. But I know this. We are all part of a greater story, a story written long before we were born. If Nostradamus spoke of a leader from the East, perhaps he was seeing something that none of us could yet understand. I cannot control what the future holds, but I must do my best to lead with love. Father Gabriel nodded, but deep down, a seed of unease began to take root. The words of Nostradamus, now seemingly woven into reality, had an unsettling power. They suggested that Tagle's rise was part of a larger cosmic plan, and that his reign might be anything but ordinary. As he left the palace that night, Father Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that the world was about to be rocked by something far more profound than anyone had anticipated. As weeks turned into months, Pope Tagle's leadership began to shape the Church in unprecedented ways. He introduced sweeping reforms, focusing on transparency, accountability, and the healing of deep wounds within the institution. Yet, there was something else that stirred the Vatican in a way that no one could explain. Strange, unexplainable events began to occur around him. One evening, as Pope Tagle was praying in the Sistine Chapel, a mysterious light appeared before him. It wasn't a reflection, nor was it a trick of the mind. It was as if the very air around him had shifted. The light seemed to pulse with energy, glowing softly, illuminating the sacred space. For a moment, Tagle felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as though he were standing on the threshold of something divine, something eternal. The following day, word spread that Pope Tagle had received a private visitation during his prayer, though no one knew for sure who had appeared before. The Pope, however, remained silent on the matter, his expression serene, as though he had seen what needed to be seen and was ready to move forward. The rumors swirled, and the world began to question. Had the prophecy of Nostradamus not only been fulfilled in Tagle's election, but had divine forces truly marked him for something far greater? Was he not merely the leader of the Catholic Church, but a figure who would usher in a new spiritual era for humanity? Pope Tagle, with his characteristic humility, addressed the growing mystery in a sermon delivered to millions. "I am but a servant of the Lord," he said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "There are mysteries in this world that no one can fully comprehend. But I know this. Each one of us is called to a purpose. And that purpose is not about us, but about bringing light to the darkest corners of our world. My only prayer is that I may serve as a vessel of that light." But as the months passed, darker forces began to stir. The Vatican, for all its newfound hope, was still a place of politics and power struggles. Rival factions within the Church, some, desperate to maintain their influence, began to challenge Tagle's radical reforms. They saw him as a threat, a man whose humility and profound connection to God threatened the old ways of the Vatican. As the tensions grew, Pope Tagle received another visitation, this time one that would change everything. Late one evening, as he stood in prayer before the altar, the figure of an angel appeared before him, its face serene but urgent. The angel spoke in a voice that seemed to echo through the very chambers of the Vatican. "The world is on the brink of change, Pope Tagle. You are a key to the transformation that is to come, but you must prepare. There will be trials, struggles, and betrayals. Your faith will be tested as never before. You will lead not just a church, but an entire generation to a new understanding of God's love. But it will not come without sacrifice. Tagle stood frozen in place, his heart heavy with the weight of the words. "Am I prepared?" he whispered. The angel's eyes softened. "You are not alone. Trust in the Lord's plan." The prophecy of Nostradamus had not been just a prediction of power. It was a foretelling of a profound spiritual revolution. Pope Luis Antonio Tagle, the humble servant from the East, had been chosen not to rule, but to guide humanity through a turbulent and transformative age. But the trials ahead would challenge his very soul. And in the years that followed, as the world watched, Pope Tagle would face not only opposition within the Church, but forces beyond human understanding that would push his faith to its limits. Yet through it all, his unwavering belief in the transformative power of love and humility would serve as a beacon of hope for a world in desperate need of healing. In the end, the greatest prophecy of all was not about a man's rise to power, but about how one man, through his faith and sacrifice, could change the course of history. The question, though, remained: would the world be ready for the change he was about to bring? As Pope Tagle gazed out over the vast expanse of St. Peter's Square, he whispered a prayer, his heart full of hope, but also a quiet fear of what was to come. "May I be a vessel for your will, Lord, and may your love guide us all." And with that, the world waited for the next chapter of the greatest spiritual revolution of the century to unfold. The days leading up to the one-year anniversary of Pope Luis Antonio Tagle's papacy were filled with palpable anticipation. A year of radical reforms, outreach to the marginalized, and unexpected mystical events had left the world on edge, as if standing at the precipice of something profound. The Vatican, once an institution of unwavering tradition, now felt like a place where history was being rewritten in real time. Pope Tagle had not only reshaped the role of the papacy, but had ignited a fire of spiritual renewal across the globe. But the mystery of the ancient prophecy and the strange occurrences surrounding him was still a question hanging in the air like a heavy fog. The world could not deny that something extraordinary had happened since Tagle's rise to the papacy. From his heartfelt prayers for world peace to his profound ability to heal broken relationships within the Church, there was no denying his spiritual influence. Yet, as with all things, some whispered doubts in the shadows. Some began to wonder, was there more to his leadership than simple humility? Was there a greater force, something more supernatural, guiding his every step? Father Gabriel, still one of Pope Tagle's closest confidants, could no longer ignore the uneasy feeling settling in his heart. Despite the miracles he had witnessed, the inexplicable healings, the visions, and the deep sense of divine purpose that seemed to flow through Pope Tagle, there was something deeper that troubled him. It was a sense of foreboding, a whisper in the back of his mind that suggested that the prophecy of Nostradamus had not only predicted Tagle's rise, but hinted at something far darker and more dangerous yet to come. One evening, Father Gabriel found himself once again in the presence of Pope Tagle. This time, they were not in the grand halls of the Vatican, but in a small chapel in the outskirts of Rome, where the Pope often went to pray in solitude. The two men sat in silence for a long while, the weight of the moment hanging between them. Finally, Father Gabriel spoke. "Your Holiness," he began cautiously, "do you ever feel that something beyond your understanding is happening? Something that is bigger than all of us? You've spoken of feeling guided, of hearing a voice, of receiving visions. But do you ever wonder if all of this is leading to something we cannot yet see?" Pope Tagle looked at him with an intensity that took Gabriel by surprise. "I do, Father. There are days when I wake up feeling like I'm walking in someone else's shoes, that I am merely a vessel for something much greater than myself. I know it is not my strength, my wisdom, or my power that has brought me to this place, and I fear that the prophecy is not just about leading the Church. It is about a greater mission, one that could change the course of human history." "Father," Gabriel's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, Your Holiness?" Pope Tagle hesitated, as if weighing the gravity of his next words. "I have seen glimpses, Father. Not visions, but moments, flashes of understanding. I fear that the prophecy of Nostradamus was not just about me becoming Pope. It is about something much darker, a reckoning, a shift in the world that will come not from the light, but from the shadows. And I fear I may be the one who must bear the weight of that." Father Gabriel's face went pale. "What are you saying, Pope Tagle? Are you suggesting that the prophecy is something to be feared?" "I am not suggesting it," Tagle responded, his voice quiet yet firm. "I am telling you, I believe that the prophecy foretold not only the rise of the Pope from the East, but the trials, the suffering, and the turmoil that would follow. There is a great battle to come, one that will test not only my faith, but the very soul of humanity." In the weeks that followed, the Pope's fears seemed to be slowly realized. Strange occurrences began to intensify across the world. Inexplicable natural disasters, political upheaval, and a rising tide of division within the Church itself. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. It was a world on the brink, and people were beginning to look to Pope Tagle for answers. But the burden was growing too heavy for him to carry alone. The Vatican itself was rife with tension. A clandestine faction of cardinals, whose influence had waned under Tagle's reformist leadership, began plotting against him. Whispers of betrayal circled through the Vatican's corridors. Even within his inner circle, doubt was creeping in. Were the changes he had initiated too radical? Was the Church ready for such a transformation? Pope Tagle, increasingly burdened by these trials, retreated into prayer. His heart was heavy, his spirit weary. One night, as he knelt before the altar, a sudden silence descended upon him. And then, as if in response to his plea for guidance, a figure appeared before him. It was an angel, the same angel who had visited him months before. Its presence was overwhelming, yet comforting. "Your Holiness," the angel spoke, its voice like a soft breeze. "You have been chosen for this path, not because it is easy, but because you have the strength to endure. You will face trials that no man has ever known. But remember, the prophecy is not your burden alone. It is the burden of all who walk with you." Pope Tagle stood in awe, trembling. "What do you mean? I feel as though the world is crumbling around me. What am I supposed to do?" The angel's eyes softened with understanding. "You will not bear this alone. The time has come to seek the truth of the prophecy, not in the past, but in the future. There is a twist, a hidden truth that no one has foreseen. Tell me, Pope," Tagle urged. "The prophecy does not end with your rise," the angel said. "It ends with your fall. But it is not the fall of the man. It is the fall of the institution. For the Church, as you know it, must die for a new church to be born. A church that is not bound by its history, its power, or its glory. It is the birth of a new way, a way of pure love, free from the trappings of power and corruption. This is your mission. You must not only lead the faithful, you must lead them to transcend the institution itself." The words hit Pope Tagle like a wave. He had always known that his papacy was not just about leading the Church. It was about something far greater. But the realization that the very institution he had sworn to protect might need to be dismantled for a new spiritual truth to emerge was a revelation that shook him to his core. And then, in an unexpected twist, the unthinkable happened. A shockwave rippled through the world as Pope Tagle, in an unprecedented move, announced to the Church and the world that he would step down. "The time has come," he said in a televised address, "for the Church to evolve into something that no longer requires a head, no longer requires a single leader to guide it. The true leadership comes from the hearts of the faithful, not from the walls of any institution." The Vatican, stunned into silence, could scarcely comprehend the implications of his words. In one sweeping gesture, Pope Tagle dismantled the very foundation of papal authority. The Church would now exist as a global community without a singular pope to guide it, shifting the focus back to the people's faith and connection with the divine. The world was left in shock. Was this the final fulfillment of Nostradamus's prophecy? A pope who would bring the Church to its knees, only to rise again in a completely new form? Or had something far greater been at work? Something that transcended even Nostradamus's vision? In the end, Pope Luis Antonio Tagle's final act of faith was the most radical and profound twist of all, the destruction of the very institution he had led, so that the light of spiritual truth could emerge, untainted by power, and live within the hearts of all, and with that, the world would never be the same again.